Welcome. I'm Steve Winnick with the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress, and we're going to be talking today with the members of PIQSIQ, an Inuit throat singing group, and we're going to ask them at the very beginning to just introduce themselves. So here are the members of PIQSIQ. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Ayalik.
I'm Inuksuk Mackay.
And would you just tell us a little bit of background about your singing tradition?
So throat singing, our word for it is katajak, and it is traditionally done between two women, although there are many genders who throat sing. And throat singing in North America is specifically a cultural tradition that belongs to the Inuit in North America. And it is a beautiful expression. It's a beautiful way to bond between people as an art form. And it is also a cultural practice that has really suffered through colonization and racism at the hands of the government and the church, and was almost in danger of being lost. And so we're very happy to be able to be part of this resurgence in throat singing, in not only in a cultural setting, but also in a popular kind of not mainstream, but a more visible contemporary expression of the culture. So that's a bit of context. You want to talk about the technique?
Sure. So it's also has a game element. Mm-hmm. And so how it goes is you practice and you have a leader and a follower. So it's kind of like a round. So, when you're singing, row, row, row your boat, gently downstream your boat. So it's like that, but it's just a split second for the follower to respond. And so while your partner is breathing in, you're breathing out and you're alternating. And that way, so it's very quick and you have to be paying attention. So we stand nice and close so we can see and feel the movements. And it's a little bit like cat and mouse. So you'll be following your partner through the song and they can change it and you have to follow at a split second. And so if you miss a beat, then your partner would win. Or if you laugh, your partner would win. And sometimes if you're really serious, even no smiling, which is tough sometimes.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
like,
wonderful.
Don't think about pink elephant.
Yeah.
Right. So you mentioned that this tradition has suffered through racism and colonization. Can you explain that a little bit, how the tradition was suppressed?
Yeah. So across Canada, in the early days of Canada, there were Indian agents, and there were agents of the government who were put in place to police Indigenous people. And to ensure that we weren't practicing our singing, our dancing, our ceremonies. And there were times in place in Canadian history where any expression, any wearing of any regalia, any dance, any coming together, anything like that was legally finable and punishable, either by fine or by imprisonment, or there was all kinds of punishments public shaming. And so that was writ large across Canada for periods of time, and throat singing was not exempt from that. And so that's, and then apart from the sort of administrative sort of racism, there was a lot of shame and fear that was put onto Inuit for many aspects of their culture, our religion, our art, and sort of the striking the fear of God into the Inuit was, one of the biggest tenets of the church. And to anything that resembled any sort of animism or paganism or, anything like that was seen as evil and wrong. So a lot of the things that we experienced were at the hands of that, and with that mentality. And especially for people who don't understand throat singing, who, if their ear is hearing this for the first time, I'm imagining it could sound, scary or evil or demonic or what have you. And
given a certain cultural background.
Yeah, if you have no idea what it sounds like, you hear these two women standing very close together, making strange sounds that are otherworldly. And like, of course, if you're, a settler from wherever and you're scared of eternal hellfire, then maybe you'd be afraid of that.
Right. Understood. That's but it is, of course, a tragic aspect of history. I wonder how it feels now that in this concert, for example, you sang a concert that was sponsored by the American government through the Library of Congress and the Canadian government through the Embassy of Canada.
What's the question?
We had singing in that context. What is it like now?
So I consider that to be an aspect of reconciliation. I think that it's important for our government to support these practices and to see them be revitalized. So I think it's a really important part of the relationship building that needs to be ongoing between governments and between First Peoples across the continent.
Mm-hmm. And have you found attitudes toward Indigenous arts have changed in Canada generally over the years that you've been practicing this?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think that the internet is a big part of that. So it's allowed us to tell our stories ourselves. So I think when I was younger, I saw a lot of settlers telling our stories for us. Mm-hmm. And so now that we each have a social media platform and TikTok and all that, we can be the tellers of our own stories, and we're sharing information straight from us. And so we're seeing it go out in a way that sits right with us. And it's allowing people who are learning to connect and to learn straight from the people who are willing to share. So I think that that's been a big part of the change.
Mm-hmm. And I think in a North American context, different from a European context, when we've been able to spend time in Europe and do tours and concerts and things, is one of the tricky things about things being a little bit more contemporary and more available to the average Canadian, the non-Indigenous Canadian, is that I think there also comes a bit of a pride in like, oh, I know what that is, and so I don't have an issue, or I don't have any blind spots, or I feel like sometimes, especially as Canadians, we love to throw our tolerance into people's faces, and we love to be boastful about our salad bowl mixing pot, that we're all, super accommodating, and we aren't capable of atrocities, but really when you dig a little deeper, under the surface is the history that this country was based on, that Canada was based on. And so it's actually kind of refreshing sometimes to leave North America and go to other countries where people are like, have no ideas, and also don't have any, priding themselves in being experts, when really they still have a lot to learn.
Right. Very interesting. So tell us a little bit about how you got started in music, just practicing music in general.
Well, I think we started throat singing quite young, around 5 years old, I would guess. And it was very much a game. It was a pastime. It was something we did while we were camping. When we were visiting our cousins in Nunavut, we would practice and take those songs home with us to Yellowknife and try to become expert. And we also did class. So we have a classical music background. So violin, clarinet, piano.
Very badly.
And I played classical piano for many years. We were also really into choir. We love choir music. And so I think just the smattering of sort of traditional and contemporary influences can kind of show through in the aesthetic that we grew into. Mm-hmm. So yeah, a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
And always really based in fun and play. I think that was a huge part of our musical upbringing. Mm-hmm. Was like music as play and music as story, and using it when we were out camping. And it just always had this really beautiful element of spontaneity and improv, even before we knew what that was.
And just sort of listening and catching and following and seeing where it would go. So improvisation is a really important element of our style.
And sure, and at some point, and at some point you decided to start mixing this tradition with other forms of music. How did that start for you?
So we have such a diverse style in terms of our aesthetic of what we enjoy and what we like to listen to. And so it was a really fun exercise to be blending these things that might seem at odds, but really there's a great affinity in terms of style when we start to sew them together. And we started playing with a looping pedal. So we're able to take layers of our voice and loop them over and over and have different parts all in one song. And that we can kind of create these sounds very quickly. And in a matter of seconds, we can have 10 different voices all in one thing to kind of create this instant choir that we really love, and have really strange harmonies and really, unusual sounds kind of all mixed in with the guttural and the angelic kind of all mixing into one. And that seemed just like a super natural kind of thing for us to be exploring the depth that the voice can do. The human voice is capable of so many sounds in one body, and to be able to really stretch the limits of that in how we sing with each other was just kind of a natural extension of what we've always been doing since we were kids.
Mm-hmm. And what's the idea behind PIQSIQ specifically, this one group that you are now?
So PIQSIQ was conceived of actually in the summer, so it's a little bit contrary to its meaning. A PIQSIQ is a snowstorm, and on the tundra where there's no trees or not a lot of land formations, the wind can whip through at quite a pace and kick up the snow. So it sort of picks up the snow and brings it up sort of this way. So you have the snow coming down and the snow going up, and we call it a whiteout because you just can't see anything. So it's basically a sort of supernatural seeming phenomenon, but it's a very common occurrence in the Arctic. And the day that we decided, you know what, this technology blend thing is worth exploring, and we're going to form a new group and, go for it. The day we decided that, we were like, well, we need some photos and, a name. And so we had just been laying that all out, and lo and behold, there's a thunderstorm out the window. So we were like, storm, it's a storm. Perfect. So we beetled out to the dock and did a song that we had just composed a couple weeks before that was called Echoes and Electricity. And we're like, oh, the timing is so good. So that's sort of how PIQSIQ was born. Officially. Yeah.
Great. But you had been collaborating. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
You had been collaborating both as a duo and with other musicians for some time by then. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we put the name formally on us as a band, even though we've been singing for 25 years together.
Right. Great. Well, one thing that you mentioned that I think will be interesting for our viewers, because not everyone is who will be watching this is familiar with the geography of Canada. So that you mentioned visiting your relatives in Nunavut, but you actually being in Yellowknife. And I assume that Nunavut is at least partially your ancestral land where this tradition would have been most common. So explain what that being at a distance is like for your tradition.
So we're born and raised in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, and if you know where Edmonton is, we're directly north of Edmonton, about 1,500 kilometers. I don't know miles, can't help you there.
That's fine.
So we were born and raised there. And back when we were kids, there was the Yukon Territory and Northwest Territories was all one big territory from basically where we were kind of going east. And when the birth of the territory of Nunavut didn't happen until 1999, I think. And then that branched off as officially Inuit territory. Like this was Nunavut, our land in Inuksuk, is a recognized sort of separate territory. With now there's 3 territories: the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Nunavut. And so a lot of Inuit in the Northwest Territories, I know for myself at least, had like mixed feelings about Nunavut forming, because it felt like, oh, now family is even farther away. Not only are they geographically farther away, they're administratively far away because they're part of a whole different jurisdiction. So I know a lot of Inuit had some mixed feelings about it, feeling like, oh, but if we're in the Northwest Territories, does that make us less Inuk? So it was a strange time, and I remember being young and being like, what does this mean? What does this territory mean? Am I still Inuk if I live in Yellowknife. And so that was a distance that we've I think done a really good job of navigating by still being really connected to our families. And so there not being a lot of like hospitals and stuff in the north, a lot of family comes to Yellowknife for getting their wisdom teeth pulled and, you know, things like that. Babies, checkups, things like that. So
Bingo.
Yeah, shopping, going down south to Yellowknife for a shopping spree. So whenever family would come to Yellowknife, that was when we would just like soak them all up and sing and eat food and visit and
which was pretty often, thank goodness.
Yeah, thank goodness it was as frequent as it was, because it kept the connection really strong with our community. And
we would also spend most spring break, summers, Christmases in Nunavut as well.
Yeah. So really special to be able to keep that tie and that bond really strong with our communities, because it's we've always known who we are. We've always known we're Inuk. We've always known that we're part of this culture, and really grateful for the people who've surrounded us in our upbringing with that.
Mm-hmm. So after you named the band and you started to play out as, you know, as this group, what are typical venues for you to play in Canada?
Lots of music festivals. So there's a pretty vibrant music festival ring in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
Traveling in Canada can be challenging. I mean, it's a big country. It's a low population. So it's a bit tough to tour. The price doesn't always add up. But a lot of music festivals. We also have worked with schools and with museums and post-secondary education institutions, conferences. So a little this, little that.
Mm-hmm.
But right now it's all coming at you live from our webcams and from streaming and in the studio in the garage. So everything for now. And I think that we're looking forward in some ways to the opening back up, and in other ways we're grateful for the ability to adapt and innovate our practice to be able to keep sharing and keep working in this new world that we're in,
while being home with their families.
Yeah.
It's one thing that we've been talking about here at the library is, you know, eventually things will go back to normal to some extent, with, you know, as far as the pandemic is concerned, but to what extent will music and other sort of performance genres go back to what normal was before, and to what extent will we recognize the advantages of this kind of format, which, you know, as you say, Canada is a huge country, and having to travel all over it isn't necessarily the best way to distribute your live performances. So
the one thing I'm grateful for in all of this is a shift in thinking that I think people have had to do regionally, nationally, internationally, is all of a sudden things that were never possible are suddenly very possible. And a notion of some sort of universal income or basic income is like suddenly on the table, or, you know,
right.
that meeting that could have been an email is now.
Which also is very exclusionary for folks who live with disability, who would have opted for these options, but were told it just wasn't possible.
And now that this has done a huge intervention into that kind of thinking, which I'm really thankful for, because we've had, in some way, it's been limiting in some ways, but in others, you know, we've done live streams when people are like, oh, I'm tuning in from Germany and I'm really loving this, or I saw you guys when you were here last time and been wanting to see you, and like just things like that, where it's like all of a sudden things are way more possible. And I'm glad for that opening of the box, thinking that we're able to, like, why can't we have a hybridized performance model? Why can't we, you know, do this or that, or have, you know, if people aren't able to leave and come to venues in person, why not make it more accessible? So it's been cool to see that under really bad circumstances, but glad that is possibly one of the outcomes, is a change in thinking.
Right. Yeah, that's what we've been thinking too. So it's pretty amazing time in that sense. One thing I'll say about your music as a genre that blends layered performances from you with other kinds of sounds, electronica and the like. It lends itself very well also to the recording studio. There's a lot of things that you can do, and you have released several recording projects. So let's talk a little bit about them. I guess the latest one that I'm familiar with is Dark Star, and it seems like a very interesting project from a folklore perspective as well. So if you'd like to tell us a little about that.
Yeah, so with that story, we were looking to challenge the really strict dichotomies between light and dark. So growing up in the Arctic, we have some extremes, one of them being weather, the other being daylight. So in the summer, we have 24-hour sunlight, and in the winter, we have nearly 24-hour darkness, and in some of the more northerly communities, total darkness for a couple of months in the winter. So we're used to navigating extremes and not putting a value on them. They just are. And so I think that that's a little bit of the culture clash between Inuit culture and settler Christianity coming over. There's in settler culture, especially being rooted in Christianity, there's quite the dichotomy between light and dark, and light is good and dark is bad. And in the Arctic, we just can't afford to see it that way. Like if you're
more than half our life is bad.
And so we learn to navigate extremes and to navigate darkness and to appreciate light, but also to see beauty in the dark. And so in this story, we were looking to take some elements from Inuit folklore and sort of stitch them together into a story that really conveyed that area that isn't really here or there. It's sort of that in-between space where we like to play creatively.
And with a lot of Inuit storytelling, it's hard to find the hero's story. It's hard to find the classic kind of Aristotelian model of narrative. It's not, a story, rising action, climax, and then everything is ta-da at the end. The heroes in one story, in the next are the villain. The people are complicated and complex, and are hypocritical at times if you're looking at it from a really simplistic lens. And there's not this obsession with the sort of hero's journey and triumphing over evil. It's at the end of the story. A lot of times, even if you're asking an elder a question, they might tell you a story, and at the end you might be like, oh, well, geez, I know less now than I did before, because it's just like, just tell me. And that's sometimes not the answer. There's a lot of teaching through story. And I think that being brought up with some of those stories really helps to highlight that things are complicated and that there isn't this super clear, light and dark, black and white. Everything is like shades of complexity that you have to navigate and like trust your intuition and be comfortable with. So that's also one of our inspirations with that album, is like there's no good guy or bad guy, and there's not this obsession with good and evil in the same way, and just being able to celebrate that.
And it combines your music with storytelling. Is that right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, another album that you've done, which I think is interesting given what you've told us about the history of the suppression of throat singing by both the state and the church, is that you actually recorded a Christmas album a couple of years ago. And that must have been a somewhat complex idea to do, given that. So explain how that came about a little bit, and tell us the name of the album and that kind of thing.
So in 2019, we released PIQSIQ In Search of Harmony, which is a Christmas EP. And we had been talking about doing it for some time. When we first started playing with looping, Tiff was actually, I believe, in Greenland. And I remember her FaceTiming me and being like, check this out. And she
I was in Denmark.
You were in Denmark. Yeah. And she had been looping Carol of the Bells, which is our favorite carol. And I was like, you're onto something here. And so that's sort of how the idea to start layering the music was born. And so that was years ago. And from there, we were like, kind of working up to it. So we've been talking about it for years.
Yeah.
And we wanted to make sure it was super grounded, though, before we just dove into it, and made sure that our intentions were, in line with our beliefs. And so for us, Christmas is really complicated. I mean, on the one hand, we love the family time. We love the festivities. We love the food. We love the celebration. And the music is incredible. And on the other hand, the more we learned about colonization, the harder it became to celebrate it in true form. And so we went a few years where we stopped celebrating Christmas when we were going through a period of adult realization, just really coming to terms with the loss of culture, the loss of lives, the loss of land. And it was too bitter to be sweet. So we had stopped celebrating for a few years. And so after that, the kids were born and we were like, do we celebrate it now? Like, what do we do?
We have to do something in the winter.
We started celebrating the solstice and we're like, it's not the same. So we eventually started to develop our own stitching together of tradition and taking what felt honest and right to us and stitching it together with history and with our cultural practices. And it kind of became our new thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so one thing we missed was Christmas music. And so how to engage with it and celebrate it in a way that didn't hurt so badly.
And was just honest about the hurt and not trying to make it perfect and lovely and
totally
joy to the world all the time.
Yeah, totally. So it's the album is basically our stitching together of all of those complicated emotions and in search of harmony, trying just our journey of life of trying to find that harmony in some really difficult situations.
All right. That sounds like something that our viewers might want to check out as well. And then, of course, there was Altering the Timeline. Explain that. Was that your first recording?
Yeah, that was our first studio offering from PIQSIQ. And we partnered with the amazing Ruby Singh, who is a producer, looper extraordinaire here in Vancouver. And we were performing at a festival in Calgary, and we met Ruby and hit it off right away. And one night during the sun was still just hanging in the air, and we said, do you want to come and do because he's an incredible beatboxer, and we said, do you want to come and do a little improv by the river with us? And he's like, sure, let's do it. And so we went out to the river, and which was, the river was right in the festival ground, so you could just go jump in if you wanted to. And so we were throat singing, and then Ruby started to beatbox, and it was so fun, and it was so spontaneous. And right away we were like, this is something cool is happening here. And so we were just so stoked and BFFs right away. And we made plans to come to Vancouver.
Not totally though. It was more like, we're going to work
cool.
together.
This is cool. We're going to figure something out. Flash forward. We were doing something in Kelowna, I think, and then it just worked out that we were able to kind of change our flights and come hang out in Vancouver for a bit. And we went to Afterlife Studios, which is a really, really renowned studio here in Vancouver. And we worked together for about a week. Ruby had done some really cool backing tracks and working with the textures that you hear in the album. And then we went in and we recorded in the studio, and
very improvised,
I
would say our most improvised album.
Very, very much so. Totally in line with our live performance element, how most of our set is improvised. And so it was cool to go in with sort of Ruby's voice through the electronics, also jamming with us and us to respond to. Otherwise, we just are only responding to each other. And then what we walked away with was Altering the Timeline, and an album that goes 5 tracks, and it's got fun, upbeat dance kind of things, and then it's got these like sorrowful, mournful, like textured ones, and then we've got one that's incredibly atmospheric and cinematic, and we just kind of go through the tracks, and
it's very land-based,
very rooted in the land. And yeah, that was our first EP, and we had such a great response with that one that we were like, well, here we go, let's off to the races, let's keep going in this direction, because it was so well received.
Sounds good. That brings up kind of another question, which is, of course, you're a group composed of 2 women. The question is this throat singing a women's tradition generally, or do men also participate? And does it differ?
Traditionally, it would have been mostly women. It was a pastime. So while men were hunting, women would be, doing a lot of other work at camp, and also throat singing to pass the time and to bond.
Put your babies to sleep.
Put your babies to sleep. Yeah, but it's not considered taboo. Like, it wouldn't be, people of all genders can throat sing. It wouldn't be discouraged. Actually, one of the best throat singers we know is from Greenland, a fellow from Greenland. He's an incredible throat singer. Yeah.
And it, with a lot of things in Inuit culture, there are sort of gender tendencies, but in a lot of this, in the same sense, life is super hard. Everybody has to know how to do everything to some extent. You have to be generalists as well as your specialists in your area. And there's a great amount of fluidity in terms of roles and responsibilities. Everybody child rears, everybody has to know how to sew. We all sing, we all drum. And things that tend towards different gender roles, I think, are more of a case of practicality in terms of just who was around. So it's fun to throat sing with Inuit men. There's a few out there who are really great, and it's always great to just be like, throat singing with someone whose voice sounds totally different as well.
Right.
Yeah, and I remember hearing stories too, where like, yeah, sure, generally men would hunt and generally women would sew. But like Tiff was saying, everyone needed to know how to do everything. And I remember specifically hearing a story from an elder where they're like, sometimes a boy would be born who wanted to sew. And it was like, why stop him? Go ahead. And sometimes there would be girls born who wanted to hunt. And it's like, go ahead. Like, why create disharmony, when life is hard enough?
Yeah, that's a great philosophy when you think about it, and one we could do with more of in the world, I think. So that's good. That's good to hear. Yeah. So you mentioned some throat singers who are men who you think are great, and I just wonder if you have other Indigenous artists that you would recommend that our viewers listen to. Anyone that's influenced you?
We love the Who band from Mongolia.
Right.
The like amazing hard metal throat singing Mongolian band. We think they're so cool.
And the Ainu band.
Oh yeah, Okidub Ainu band. Ainu band out of Japan, who are incredible. Alien Weaponry, amazing Maori band from New Zealand. There's
Who's the
so
fellow
much
from Australia that we've discovered? And
Oh,
we're like,
Neil Morris, Dreaming Now. There is incredible music. Oh yeah, there is incredible music coming out of Aotearoa, and across the ocean. There's so much going on that's just incredible to listen to. Amazing artists out of Hawaii. There's some pretty amazing Indigenous artists out there.
And how about within electronica and other fields? Are there musicians that have been particular influences on you?
Maybe Enya.
Sure.
We loved when the Viva Ibiza started coming out the way back. We were all about that.
Just like 4 on the floor music. Don't
cleaning and throat singing.
So yeah, we've got, like, if you were to like scroll through our playlist, it's the most random,
very eclectic,
random music that will just have like Soundgarden, like 90s grunge next to like really kind of
Britney Spears.
Britney Spears and like Euro pop next to like Emiliana Torrini, and just like we're all over the map sometimes with what we listen to, and it's fun because you're always, you know, your palette is just so different all the time, and it's really inspiring in a way to be like, oh, did you hear that, like that drum line? That's really, really cool. And like take that from this and then mix it with whatever.
Our technical terms. Did you feel that like
or it's kind
Right.
of like, did you hear that? God bless Ruby, our producer, when we're just like, we just want it to feel
when
more
we're
like
doing edits,
oof,
you know, like he's like, okay.
having these like really weird, like esoteric terms that we're like, you know, when, and he just magically makes it happen.
For some reason it works.
It's always great to have producers that you can communicate with that way, sort of non-verbally. It's so important.
A great deal of nonverbal. You know that scene in the movie, when the opening scene,
And
when
the
he's at
guy,
the cliff, and then that. I want it to sound like how that looks and feels.
Right. Right. So, you know, since you presented your concert for the Library of Congress and the Embassy of Canada without much commentary within the video itself, is there anything that you'd like our viewers to know about it that might also kind of deepen their appreciation for the concert once they've viewed the concert video itself?
One of the things that we really miss about doing live performance, you know, with an audience and with, thank you, you know, where we can have like literally people in front of us to connect with and to also be a part of the performance and kind of informing with the room, the tone and the energy that's in the audience. So we for sure really miss that. And one of the things that we like to create when we're doing our performances is a seamless journey from start to finish. And the magic that we're trying to create, we've found that when there's banter and talking, it kind of breaks it a little. It interrupts the momentum and the energy. So with all love and connection that we can muster across a screen, that was one of the things that, you know, people in an audience jumping on board with us and coming on a bit of a journey. And then when it's done, it's done. And we love to talk and visit and chat with people in the lobby afterwards, but that's just the way that it is right now.
Right. Well, we're seeing this interview as partly that, your opportunity to do that, you know, chat with us and whoever else has watched the video, and then we'll be, you know, placing this where they can find it, certainly. So thanks for doing this with us. And I wonder if you'd like to tell us if you have any future plans for the band.
Yeah.
Lots.
We're working on a big project right now we're so excited about. We are building a new instrument. We designed a new instrument made out of a caribou saw. It'll be a stringed instrument, and it'll be plug-in, and you'll be able to pluck it kind of like a harp or play it with a bow, and the bow will be made out of baleen. And we're working on our first full-length studio album, and we will be putting out a couple of music videos with it. And so we're in the planning stages now, the writing stages, and in the building stages. And we're super excited. We're shooting to have it released this fall.
All right.
Doesn't have a name yet.
We're introducing this instrument to also see what its voice sounds like and how it's going to be contributing to our sound. And we're so excited to have something that's from our homeland too, that we're going to have this antler orb creation and something from the ocean as well to really just like hold on to in the creation of this new world that we're going to be making.
All right. It sounds like something that our viewers will want to check out. So I hope that we'll be able to keep following your career as it continues. I want to thank both of you for being here with us. Again, this is part of the Homegrown at Home concert series from 2020, even though we're doing this interview in 2021. And you were kind enough to give us our concert back last year, and we're really happy to have you here for this interview as well. So thanks very much. Now, I'm very conscious of the fact that I did not, I think, pronounce your group's name correctly at the beginning. So teach me how to say the name of your group.
So if you think about rhyming it with milk silk,
Mm-hmm.
so think of that when you say PIQSIQ.
PIQSIQ.
There you go.
There you go.
Nice.
All right. Well, thank you very much. These are the members of PIQSIQ, and we are saying thank you very much to them once again. And this has been an interview in the Homegrown at Home concert series. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ako yan, me.